another product. Could be of a same kind or could be of a different kind to increase what's possible in the system. So a beautiful example is what we see through all the smart initiatives or the smart things that is around us. If we say smart grid, we say what's happening there. We talk of one equipment developing capability of talking with another equipment and thereby like having a grid or having a network established. Now, how would these things become possible? An essential element that starts coming in here is standard. It must be a way in which one could interface with another. How this whole concept of internet started coming in, I see a lot of things. That is the way things have, the pieces that have come in got enabled because there's standards, or there were standards like present in those things. A standard is a tool where we start increasing on the scope of what we can deliver to whoever is the end customer or to what's possible technology-wise. There's a whole lot of integration that needs to be done, and it's never one person like who is like I may have my expertise only on certain area, but what's the interface that I will develop? You have an expertise in a different area, and we need to speak to each other. So there's an interface. And how do we speak? So we start defining this. And there's so many ways in which, like here, we're taking the technology to a common person, and how a common man will now start integrating with such a system. So many areas of technology are now like coming in with good initiatives required and standard. With that, I'd like to have Biju comment on what's an open standard and how are patents handled and technologies that are governed by an open standard.
Thank you, Satil. I would dwell upon the Linux system to talk about these open standards because I represent one of the largest community which protects the Linux platform from patent aggression. So in this context, what we have seen is the ecosystem which previously we saw a lot of litigation, a lot of aggression, patent aggression, moving towards a system where the Linux as a platform is adopted by all the users from various verticals. Whether you talk about automobile sector, you talk about software industry, the service industry. So when there is a standard which has been, and there is a stability in that standard, like for example, when you use your Android phones, the day-to-day phones which you use, there is a standard there. So one would be your Android platform, so which again is coming under a standard. So this is the advantage. There is a stability in when you have a standard. So that's what I would like to talk about, where in your phones, in your chargers, you would see on a day-to-day basis that sometimes when you're using a different manufacturer, you get a different charger. But when you can't use interoperability with some other system. So if there is no standards, there would be a huge problem on a day-to-day basis. So, and a stability would be required. Otherwise, we would not be able to, as Senthil and others commented, we will not be able to connect one system with the another system, or integration would be an issue. Thank you, Senthil.
Thanks, Biju. SK, the next question to you is just briefly, you present to us on the important players who come in when we talk about SAP patents, and also touch upon on what is the interest of SAP owner and SAP implementers, and also bring in from a patent perspective, like how this or what the dynamics like when we start seeing the different players.
Even before I start talking about the interests of SAP holders or SAP owners and SAP implementers, I would like to take a step back and talk about patents and standard essential patents, and how or why I would categorize standard essential patents as a special group of patents. Right? Without understanding that difference, we would not be able to appreciate the interest between the SAP holders' interests and SAP implementers' interests, and what are the issues, all those things. So, as a first step, patents, a conventional patent will grant the patent owner a right to make, use, sell, offer to sell, and import the claimed invention. Right? When it comes to a conventional patent, if I have a technology, if I have an invention, and if I cover it by a conventional patent, then if somebody seeks a license, I am at liberty to deny it or grant it. And if I deny it, the person who sought the license is free to go and come up with an alternative which could be much better than or more efficient than my solution. And he can get a patent on it, right? So a person who seeks a license for a conventional patent is always free to come up with his own invention and get a patent on it. Let us look at what happens in case of a standard. In case of a standard settings organization, there is a problem which needs to be solved, and there are several people who come to the table and offer their solution on the table to solve this problem. Let us call these solutions as S1 to S10. But at the end of it, as an outcome of standard settings organization, there is one solution which is chosen out of these 10 solutions. Let us say S5, the solution 5 is chosen as a standard, right? Irrespective of whether S1 to S4 and S6 to S10 are meritorious or not, irrespective of the merit of the other solutions, S5 is logged in as a standard. Once it is logged in as a standard, even though the other solutions could be meritorious, they will not have a place in the market because they are not feasible to be implemented. Even if somebody implements it, there is no market for that product, right? So once a solution is selected as a standard and the patents covering it become a standard essential patent, they are in a very unique position. They are in a very unique position, meaning that there is no feasible alternative for that, or I should not say a feasible alternative, though there is an alternative, it is not feasible to be implemented. In that sense, standard essential patents can be considered as a special group of patents. Once they are considered as a special group of patents, we cannot treat conventional patent and standard essential patent as the same, right? We will talk about the issues later. So with this background, if you look at a standard settings organization and interests of several parties, it is like this. When a standard is set, normally you can classify the participants in a standard settings organization into three verticals. One is the standard essential patent holder or a technology contributor, right? I have a technology, I want to bring this technology and make it part of the standard. And because they have patents, they automatically become standard essential patent holders. They are one category. People who bring in technology, who want to make that part of the standard and who want to license it later once the standard is locked in. And there is a second category. They don't want to bring in technology to standard settings organization. They don't have a technology of their own. All they want is they want to understand what a standard is, what is going into a standard, and they want to implement it. They want to implement the standard. They are known as standard implementers. And there is a third category which could be standard SAP holder as well as SAP implementer, right? There are companies, there are people, there are inventors who want to be both. They have certain technology which should become part of the standard, and they also want to implement it. So that is the third category. Let us keep third category aside for a moment and look at the interests and the motives of the standard essential patent holders and the standard implementers, right? For a standard essential patent holder, SEP holder, the motive or the objective is to include his technology into a standard, right? And because his technology is already covered by patents, there is a huge market. All of a sudden, you have an access to a huge market, right? That is the interest of a standard essential patent holder. For a standard implementer, he wants to understand what the standard is or what are the patents covered by, what are the patents that cover the standard, and he wants to implement it, right? That is the first distinguishing factor between a standards essential patent holder and a standards essential patent, SEP implementer. The second is, for a SEP holder, I include my standard, I include my patents into a standard, and I want to license it out for revenue, right? I want to license it out for revenue. As a business, as a SEP holder, my objective as a standard essential patent holder is to maximize my revenues, maximize my royalties. But for a standard implementer, his objective would be to minimize the royalties that he or she wants to pay out to the standard essential patent holder. Here, there is already a conflict because the objectives of these two parties are exactly opposite to each other. One is to maximize, for a SEP holder, it is to maximize the royalties, whereas for SEP implementer, it is to minimize the royalties that are being paid out. And the third thing would be, in case of a standard settings organization, SEP holders do come and contribute their technology, or they agree to license their technology on FRAND terms, and nobody forces a SEP holder to come and agree to license their technology, license their patents on FRAND principles. It is a voluntary agreement, right? It's a voluntary agreement. And for a SEP implementer, based on this voluntary promise made by a SEP holder, they would go and make investments to build a business around standard, right? So these are some of the differences between, or some of the interests of a SEP implementer and a SEP holder.
Right. Thanks, SK. Yeah, you brought this thing like beautifully on the interplay between the standard essential patent holder and the interest of standard essential patent implementers. Clearly, like for when a technology becomes a standard, we do see a good likelihood of increase in scale of business. Now, not necessarily, like there may be some exceptions where the standard did not fly. Of course, the SSO agreed that, okay, this will become the standard, but not necessarily it got adopted in the market. We may have scenarios of that kind as well. But from the interest point of view, everybody who's coming together is coming together to make things work, to see that like it can increase the scope, and while defining it as a standard, of course, there is a good possibility that the scale will increase rapidly or enormous increase in scale. The questions to Sai and Sanjeev, like what would you add on to what is an SAP and on this interplay that we see on standard essential patent holder and standard essential patent implementer, and maybe all the beneficiaries of the technology that goes on to become a standard, and thereby whatever business or the product that get or services that get enabled.
I suspect that this room has two kinds of people. One, people who already know a lot about standard essential patents, and two, people who may not know much. So I'm going to try and strike a balance in what I say to cater to both sets of audiences. Patents and standard essential patents are similar in certain aspects, and they're certainly not similar in certain other aspects. Where are they similar and where are they not similar? Let's try and understand that. As far as the law is concerned, let's say, for instance, the law in India happens to be the Indian Patents Act of 1970. It doesn't strike a distinction between a patent and a patent, by and large, unless, of course, it happens to be pharma patents. So a standard essential patent is also a patent for the purposes of the Patents Act. Once it is granted, it shall be treated and it shall be bound by the provisions of the Act. But where is the departure? Where is it that you choose to chart a different course for the life of a standard essential patent, and why do you need to do so? Let's understand that the standard setting process is not a benign process which has only technical assessment as part of it. It's an intensely political process. It's an intensely commercial process, because at the end of the day, the adoption of a patent as part of a standard, or inclusion of a patent as part of a standard, results in giving the patentee enormous clout over that particular area. It may not result always in a position of dominance, but by and large, it certainly gives him a better positioning in the market compared to the holder of a normal patent. Which is why, when this patent is enforced, and it happens to be a standard essential patent, one has to observe a certain amount of caution, because it has ramifications for the entire industry. Because after all, if it's a standard essential patent, the assumption is that every person who functions in the industry, who exists in that particular industry, will have to use the patent. So although the Patents Act doesn't strike a distinction between a patent and any other patent, when courts choose to enforce, or when they are presiding over the enforcement of a standard essential patent, they will have to strike a certain amount of balance between the interest of the patentee and the interest of the other side. This is something that we need to understand. And this is a perfectly legal distinction, because at the end of the day, the grant of any injunction or any remedy at the end of the day is based on the discretion of the court. It's an equitable remedy, which means the court has to consider the consequences of the grant of a remedy in favor of a certain party, and the adverse consequences on the party which is going to suffer that particular remedy. So this is a fundamental distinction that you have to understand. And this particular distinction between a patent and a standard essential patent has multiple ramifications at different levels. One, it has a ramification on the first basket of enforcement of intellectual property. It has a consequence on the second basket of contractual freedom between a patentee and a prospective licensee or a defendant. Three, it has a specific implication on the basket of competition law, because at the end of the day, even if it is a license that is entered into between two parties, between the patentee and a particular licensee, so to speak, that particular agreement becomes more or less the benchmark for the rest of the industry. And therefore, it has market-wide ramifications, and which is why you will have to consider the competition or antitrust implications of the conduct of a patentee. So in that sense, when we approach standard essential patents, we must understand that the process goes beyond adoption of a standardized technology. It has a very serious market ramification, and this is markedly different from a normal patent, because a normal patent may have certain substitutes, there may be certain workarounds. But by definition, a standard essential patent is one where there is absolutely no non-infringing alternative, which means if you use a certain technology standard that's been prescribed by a standard setting organization, and there is a patent that covers it, then you are stepping into the territory of that particular patent. So this is a distinction that I think we must understand, because that sets the tone for the rest of the discussion in terms of what is the contractual freedom of parties, what amounts to reasonable royalty, what is that red line that a certain patentee is not supposed to cross before he enters the realm of anti-competitive conduct or abuse of dominant position. These are issues that I think we should discuss.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Now, I pick up from Sai what he stated, the putting a patent or stating, or some, SAP owner is putting his patent in the standard to the standard setting organization, saying that this is the standard setting patent. The decision is essentially a political one, as against the technical one, and then connecting that to the Sheetal and Mr. Murthy. How the Sheetal started, there is a standard, but the patent lies for making that standard functional. So the technology which makes that standard functional is the SAP. Now Mr. Murthy says that there could be 10 probable solution for that standard, to achieve that standard. Out of that 10, the number 5 or number 6 or number 7 is chosen. There comes the logic of Sai. The decision is political, more political than anything else. And if we view this in the perspective that once everybody agrees that it gives a very huge leverage, it gives that patent a very high commercial value, then many a issue comes. It is a standard. Any implementer who is implementing that standard is bound to infringe. The decision to include that patent or term that patent as a standard patent may not be essentially technical one. There is something more than that. These could be the interesting issue, more so in the fact that when a SAP owner throw his patent into the pool to an SSO, saying that here is an SAP, I commit it to the grant on the FRAN term, the SSOs come out with a huge disclaimer that SSOs, they do not, there is a disclaimer for essentiality as the validity of the patent. So essentially, if we see whether what is the technical evaluation or the valuation in terms of the standard for a patent to be termed as a standard essential patent, and then its value and the market value and the monopolistic rights attached to that SAP. In that sense, SAP is